Not long ago, if I had mentioned a singer and dancer named JoJo Siwa, you probably would have thought of a spunky young woman. She's got an irrepressibly positive outlook and that signature blonde ponytail. These days, though, the story with JoJo is, well, it's gotten more complicated than that. Hey everyone, Adam Holtz here, your host of the Plugged In Show, focused on the family's weekly conversation about entertainment, pop culture, and technology. Thanks so much for joining us today. Well, in September 2020, JoJo Siwa was named as one of Time's 100 most influential people in the world, which is one of the reasons we're going to unpack her new song, Karma, which turns out is actually an old song, because it veers in a really adult direction. We're going to talk about that transition as well as a bigger question. How can we help our daughters, especially, navigate a world in which so many teen entertainers inevitably feel that they must jettison that innocent look to stay relevant as they become young adults? And in our second segment, we're going to talk about the new show Fallout, based on the popular video game of the same name. Well, before we dive into those two conversations today, I'd love for you to check out our team's new book if you haven't done so already. It's called Becoming a Screen Savvy Family. It's practical and concrete, and it digs into deeper themes such as helping your family integrate a biblical worldview when it comes to thinking about entertainment and technology. And today, for a gift of any amount, we would love to send you your very own copy of it. You'll find information on how to do that in the episode notes for today's show. So with no further ado, let's get started. Joining me for our first segment today are Kristen Smith, Emily Chow, and Jonathan McKee. Hey, everyone.
Hi.
Hey.
Well, I thought for an icebreaker today, since we're talking about music, this might be a fun question. How have your musical tastes changed, or not, since you were an adolescent? Who wants to lead off with this one? Kristen, you're making like big eyes at me.
Go.
I'm going to let you go first.
I thought about that. Okay. So I really have always liked like Mumford and Sons, some punk rock, and John Mayer. Like that's kind of like
that sounds
so
Punkford,
like you. Mumford and Mayer.
That's exactly
Punkford
right. Yeah.
And Mayer.
Those are the bands that I hear you mention most often. So
that's kind of where I've been. But to be honest, it hasn't really changed. Now I like to really listen to like worship music, and so like I'll like add that in there. But
that's a good Christian answer.
It's true. It's true.
Good save.
The other day though, my husband was working on the truck, and he had early 2000s punk rock, like a playlist on. And I thought, man, I'm so glad I married you. We like the same music.
Yeah, like Jimmy Eat World, Fall Out Boy.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, all that
thing
came on, and I'm like, yeah, this brings me back. But it hasn't really changed much, except that I don't really listen to punk rock that much anymore because it's not really a thing unless you go back.
Okay. I will say, just as an aside right now, we talk about navigating all these things with our kids, and I'm navigating it with my 17-year-old son who absolutely adores punk rock. So yeah. We actually flew to Michigan recently to see Fall Out Boy and Jimmy Eat World. So they're front of mind for me these days.
Jeez, yeah.
Emily, what about you?
So I have always been someone who has been heavily influenced by whoever I'm hanging out with. So growing up, I basically listened to whatever my sisters listened to.
Yeah.
So, it was like NSYNC and Backstreet Boys.
Oh, yeah.
And then it was Fall Out Boy and Jimmy Eat World. And then it shifted from my sisters because they graduated. And so I had other friends that I was influenced by their musical choices, which, a lot of punk rock. And then I always, I'd turn on the radio in the car, so whatever was on the Billboard Hot 100 that was what I listened to, and that was kind of my vibe, like, for a really long time, just listening to whatever was popular or whatever other people like to listen to. Mm-hmm. But now that I'm an adult in my own right and I can choose whatever I want to listen to music, I don't know what to listen to. So I actually typically, because like going back and listening to certain songs from when I was younger, I'm like, it just doesn't hit the same way, And so I am in the process of trying to figure out what kind of music I actually like. And I do think I tend to like folksy type music, like Need to Breathe and Mumford and Sons. But
there we go.
But my actual I knew you would approve of that.
You're sitting right next to Kristen. You knew she would hit you if you didn't say that. Gently, of course. Gently.
No. But my default is classical music.
Oh, wow.
Classical's great. That's
Yeah.
a good solid choice.
Like I will default to classical music because like
so
I
calming.
I also went through like a Christian music phase when I was in college because all of my friends like we were all interning at the church together, and so it was just constantly Christian worship music, which is it was hard for me when that was all I listened to, just because every song kind of started sounding the same to me. And that's totally not true. I mean, like when I was growing up, I listened to a lot of Stephen Curtis Chapman and Michael W. Smith because my mom loved them. Again, see, I always listen to what other people listen to, but I think the only thing that I listened to, that I introduced myself to, was classical music.
Okay. Wow. That's a great answer. I mean, I think
That was really good.
It really does demonstrate that our musical choices are often shaped by the people around us.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And
That's
whether
true.
it's peers or family or siblings, which I guess siblings are family, but you know what I'm saying.
Those siblings.
Those siblings. Jonathan, what about you?
No, that's an interesting insight, Emily. I've never really heard that verbalized, but it's making me think, because as I think of a lot of the music choices, I mean, in high school, I was the little brother in the back seat of the car, and it was my brother, his friends, and me. And honestly, he was always like, I run the radio. And so it was pretty much
Shotgun.
I mean, sorry, I'm throwing
There
him
was a
under the bus,
playlist.
but I was on the bus and I had to listen to what the bus was playing. So it was, and so literally.
It was The Gambler, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Kenny Rogers.
I actually started liking a lot of it, and it was diverse. I don't know if it was diverse as Mumford & Sons and John Mayer and punk rock, but it was anywhere from like Led Zeppelin, Jimi Hendrix, to like kind of some bizarre 80s Book of Love. I mean, I could name some bands that only people probably living in the 80s would actually, some interesting, probably the makings of early Depeche Mode, Erasure, and Yazoo.
Oh, Yaz.
All that.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's a deep
This
cut.
feels eclectic.
So I was either listening to, Led Zeppelin or Yaz's Situation on the way to school every day. So it was kind of a bizarre trip. But anyway, so moving from that to now, I think I've shared before, I always confess my my love for country now. I just don't know what it is, but something about working outside and listening to it. But it is funny that last year I got the reminder, and I think I've shared this with the listeners, but you get that Spotify, here was the music you listened to last year. And I always find it fascinating. And it was like, here's the top 5 artists you listened to last year. And it was country, Chopin. So there you go, Emily. It was pretty funny.
That was unexpected.
Wow, okay.
That was unexpected.
That's Jonathan.
Emily just choked on her coffee.
Yeah, a little bit.
Morgan Wallen and Chopin. Thank you. That's
There
great.
you go.
Wow.
But you know what? She's right. The influence matters so much. I'm going to make this quick because I know it's not my turn. Sorry, Adam. But I was thinking
It's not your turn, Kristen.
I didn't listen to R&B and rap until I moved into the inner city. And I didn't listen to country until I married my very Southern husband. Yep. And I swore I would never listen to it. And now it's on all the time. So,
right.
Well,
Sorry,
I've made that
You will be
swear
assimilated.
as well, except my husband isn't Southern, so I don't have to worry about that.
Well, I will answer my question by saying you can take the boy out of the 80s, but you can't take the 80s out of the boy.
there it is. Yep.
That's right. That's right.
You're the
So-
billboard
Is
for the
anyone
80s.
surprised?
No.
Nobody's surprised. I mean, I think it's funny. I'm a very lousy guitar player, but I love rock guitar, and you'll watch guitarists mature and change over time. And for some, there's this trajectory away from heavy stuff to, well, lighter stuff. And I'm like, well, that hasn't happened for me yet. So I still just...
Is it because it's nostalgic?
Well, I think so. And I wanted to say there's a lot of brain research on this. There's actual scientific research that shows that we bond to the music of our adolescence like at a biochemical brain level in a different way than when we're older.
Yep.
Is that why John Denver still hits?
No, it is
Take
why-
Me Home Country
Yeah,
Roads.
it is.
Every single time I hear it, I'm like, yes, that's
And-
the one country I allow.
And there's also research that shows that when parents start listening to music together with their kids before the age of 10, their kids are more interested in their input on music as they get older.
That's
and
cool.
so you have the ability to shape the conversation.
Yeah.
Ooh, that's a podcast right there.
Because
really
you
is.
have a shared experience with them. And I didn't know that when my son and I started listening to music together, but I'm still his primary concert buddy, right? We go to concerts all the time, and he's almost 18. And some of the stuff I'm actually not that crazy about, but that shared experience, I think, is because we listened to stuff together when he was young. And likewise with my dad, I have that experience with Neil Diamond and the Beach Boys, right?
That's so cool.
I still love them because that's what my dad listened to. But that gets back to what we were talking about with you, Emily, that our relationships really shape those tastes. So this was maybe a little bit more in-depth icebreaker question than I intended, but I think it's a great segue into our main conversation today, which I've called the reinvention of JoJo Siwa. I talked about her a little bit in the introduction, and if you're only sort of vaguely aware of her, you might think, oh, she's that girl on YouTube that she's really spunky and peppy and happy and dances.
Not anymore.
And so, not anymore, right? Who is JoJo Siwa, and why do you think that Time, as I mentioned in the introduction, listed her as one of the 100 most influential people in the world back in 2020?
Well, she used to be in a dance competition on TV, and then she switched to YouTube. And she was the sparkly glitter bow wearing, unboxing, mansion living girl, and just like took viewers through her life and brought them in and did makeup, and everything was very, very feminine.
Yeah.
Very girly girl.
From a really young age. And so I would assume that Time pulled her out because she has like millions of followers.
Yeah.
Millions of followers of little girls who wanted to do the exact same thing as her.
Because it was pretty innocent and playful and sparkly and glittery, right?
It was,
and I don't say that as a put down.
No, it's not.
No, it was
that was kind of her
pretty.
shtick.
Yeah.
It was pretty.
And it was really sweet.
So then what happened?
Well, yeah.
I mean, it sounds like if it feels like there's a but coming here, there kind of is. So.
Well, she just came out with a song, like we're saying, called Karma. And it is about her having cheated on a girlfriend, and now this girlfriend is with somebody else.
Another girlfriend.
And now she realizes what she's done, and karma has come to get her. And then, of course, attached to this song is a pretty graphic depiction of JoJo, who is a lesbian.
Yeah.
So.
And I think if you missed a beat, you get whiplash.
Yeah,
right?
But I think that was her intention. And so I've watched a lot of interviews, and so she's pulling from wanting to be like, she's mentioned Madonna. Really, Lady Gaga is her primary influence that she's talked a lot about. Which is
interesting as we talk about the influence of music, right? I mean, It really ties into our opening question. It totally
does, yes. Because although her music video has received like a lot of hate because it kind of gives off this like Power Ranger evil villain vibe
with a little bit of Kiss mixed in because she's got like Kiss like face makeup.
She does.
Yes, it's very interesting.
It like it,
but she's pulling from Lady Gaga, and Lady Gaga has done a lot of very weird, out there, bizarre videos, and their purpose is to shock. Right. I mean, that's kind of what Lady Gaga. She's a performer, and I think JoJo is probably wanting to do that same thing, perform, because she's done that for so long.
Well, and she's very verbal about even her intentions. On the Today Show interview, she just said, hey, I want to start a new genre of music called gay pop.
Gay pop,
Right.
And the thing I just find more intriguing is just her overall effort to want to, I mean, it's like, it is almost a stigma that we've seen over and over again, call it Miley, call it whatever, but it's, I mean, her lyrics right out of the gates. I was a bad girl. I did some bad things. I swear I did it all for fun, and it meant nothing. And the thing that I think, and maybe we'll go there, but I think the thing that's fascinating to me is how the lyrics are just misleading. She goes, it never happened. It was a secret, like when a tree falls in the forest and no one hears it. So it's kind of like this, hey, I'm getting away with it. And I think that's a message we see in the media so often, which is when we see these kind of harmful messages of like, hey, it's okay, do whatever you want. I think it really twists a knife when it starts to say, hey, it meant nothing and there was no repercussions. Yeah. And I think that's the message that's coming across here. And that's, I think, the really dangerous message.
Except that there were repercussions because she's upset that after she cheated, her girlfriend cheated on her. And so there's, even in the song, there's like
Yeah.
Well, you're not even philosophically or emotionally consistent within the lyrics of this song.
Yeah, I mean,
yeah, she's in denial.
She did not write the song. This
Correct.
song was written years and years before, and they tried for Miley to sing it and a few different artists, and everyone kind of turned it down.
Yep.
And so JoJo Siwa kind of took this as her own, and I'm assuming tweaked some of the lyrics, and now this is like her debut song. And like Jonathan said, she was very vocal on multiple interviews about wanting to make her own genre of music as gay pop, and so this was like her intro to doing that. Although she's not the first gay artist who's spoken about these things. So
right, and that's, I think, one of the ironies here is that we often see this trajectory of the narrative of I've got to break out and do my own thing. Except, again, I'm going to sound like a hater, and I apologize for that. My own thing is always defined the same way.
Yeah.
Like, it's almost always sexually explicit, transgressive, and totally detonating the good girl image that came before.
It is in your face. I'm an adult now.
Right.
Well, and I think to that point, she is, but she isn't.
Right.
Right. And so,
which it comes across a little bit ridiculous.
It is ridiculous. Mm-hmm. It is ridiculous. Except that you can't talk to somebody who's 18, 19,
right,
like that, because that's rude.
They think they know
because
everything.
It's patronizing and you know.
Exactly.
Thanks, old white guy. I appreciate your perspective.
Except if you reflect, I really try to think about myself in this perspective. I grew up in a conservative Christian home. And when I went to college, I made some choices that I would never want on the screen. I would never want like publicly broadcast, right? Except that this young girl has grown up in the public eye, you know, from a way too young of an age.
Yeah.
That definitely shapes your brain chemistry. That definitely changes who you are. And then in order to make this big statement, and she wants to shift. She doesn't want to be this person anymore, which is normal, by the way. Right. It's normal to not want to be the person you were as a youth or adolescent.
Differentiating is part of the process of growing up.
Except that this is it's a loud way to do it. I have had personally, like, I've made loud choices, if you will, except that they weren't broadcast.
Okay.
And so I think, like, before people jump on her, you really have to kind of step back, and maybe you didn't as a listener, but I know I did. And so I
can't believe that you made loud choices.
Just some empathy.
So I watched a movie recently that is coming out soon, but one of the things in the film, the guy who has been he auditioned to be a pop star when he was 14 years old, and he says, you know, and right now it's like he's an adult and it's like ruining his love life, and he's like, I auditioned to be part of this band when I was 14. It shouldn't ruin my entire life. And, you know, and unfortunately it does. It kind of ruins his whole life. But it's powerful. It's what you're talking about. It's like, you know, she got into this when she was a kid, and her parents probably were not prepared for what it would become. And so they didn't know how to guide her through it. And so, you know, people will pick her apart. People will pick her parents apart. But at the end of the day, it's like, the only people whose fault it is, perhaps, are the producers and directors and stuff who they knew what was coming because they've seen it happen to child star after child star. I mean, like, the one from our generation was Miley Cyrus, you know?
Yeah.
Right.
JoJo Siwa is just the newest, you know, iteration of what's happening. And I know there were more before Miley. That's just the one that, again, from my generation. And so it's like, you know, we're so quick to judge. We're so quick to say, you know, this person is evil. Their parents are horrible for letting her go through that, yada, yada, yada. But really and truly, what it's coming down to is there's nothing that can prepare you for what fame does, what that level of fame and money and notoriety and just like public recognition brings. Because even for Christians and stuff, like, it's huge. It's something that corrupts. It's something that, you know, you probably do your best to, you know, not let it influence you or influence your children, but it does. That's just how the world works.
Yeah, it's true.
Well, and I think that one of the questions that I have, and I don't mean it as a piling on question. I certainly don't want to characterize JoJo as evil or, you know, I think that we can have a knee-jerk reaction to it. And frankly, if you watch this video,
you will have
I
one.
did.
You're going to be
the
like,
purpose.
oh, wow, what happened here?
Yeah.
But I think what's interesting to me is there's this tension between we live in the post Me Too culture, which recognizes that women are often preyed upon, sexualized, objectified.
I mean, men too.
Yeah, men too, but I think that it's still
it is
more
mostly
of a problem
a female
with women
driven force. But the reason I bring that up is because I've heard a lot of stories recently about young men who were abused by the Hollywood system. That's why I just threw that in there.
Well,
sorry.
And the tension or the paradox here is there's a recognition of that, and yet it feels like the only path forward for these women when they reach a certain point is this hypersexualization. And so I just wonder, what are the cultural pressures that these women experience that feels like this is the only way I can define myself as an adult? Jonathan?
Well, it seems like you can only, literally on one hand can you count, a female star who made it without having to do the plunging neckline
Debbie
or
Gibson.
the sexy outfit.
And then it's the end
whatever.
of the conversation.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's one of those things where we see in American Idol, we used to see it all the time. I remember watching it with the kids, and you'd see all these young kids coming out, and they had beautiful voices and even church backgrounds and everything like that. And by about episode 8, the costume designers had them in something pretty dang sexy, and the guys weren't necessarily in sexy outfits. And I would joke with the way I dressed it with my family is I'm like, oh, hey, how come the guys aren't in Speedos,
Right.
Because it was kind of an uneven playing field, it's like the girls got to be sexy, but
the guy's in a tuxedo.
Yeah, is this imposed by men? I think it's a little scary. As a father of daughters, it definitely concerned me.
I definitely think that's shifting now because there are a lot of music videos where men are also extremely provocative in ways that they haven't been in the past. However, sex sells.
Right.
We talk about it's like a very generic statement. But if you are going to sell something, and I think Adele and people like her are the exception because no offense to the others, she's insanely talented.
But even Adele felt pressure to lose like 40 or 50 pounds, and she got slinkier too. So, even somebody that feels like an exception, I would say she didn't escape this pressure either.
Yes. I do think there's a line where talent can only carry you so far. And I think that's kind of where this kind of butts up, where if people really like your talent and like what you have to offer, what more can you offer is probably the next question. And typically that's
good.
Your body or your skin. And so even Dua Lipa is like a really good example of this. I just watched her music video, and it is both men and women that are dressed pretty provocatively. And we're kind of entering this, it's not a new phase, but it's like what is left to give? And I'm going to put everything out there, and I'm going to lay it all out on the table. Question. And you get to decide what you're going to partake in, right?
Yeah. And I think in some ways it's about all sorts of things going on simultaneously. It's about not only money, it's about intimacy, it's about power, it's about identity, and it's about here's how I'm going to project myself in the world in order to have all of those things on my terms. But you may not even realize, man, I'm going to use a very strong word, there's a kind of prostitution there, right?
100%.
Yeah, there is. And I think I try to think of, again, myself or even like my daughters as they get older. I remember I don't know if there is any girl that doesn't remember not wanting to feel desired,
right?
Beautiful, attractive, people really into her, whatever that looks like. And I had the shelter of my parents, right? Like, it's not like people didn't like me. It's just that my parents were like, take that off. You're not going to wear that. Or whatever that looked like. And so when you have this young, impressionable child, really, as they get older, they start to recognize what is desirable too.
Right.
They're not stupid.
Right.
And so they are able to take that and even to use it as a selling point on their own.
I think the tough thing here is how we respond. And I wish I could go back and change so many of my responses I had as a parent. But it's so hard because I think kids so often just glean from what they see in us and what we model more than what we say or stand for. And if I really think of, what should our response be to this young girl, maybe it's just because, I don't know, my wife and I are rewatching The Chosen again, and we're just kind of watching, and it's so interesting as you're reading it in Scripture, but also on screen, seeing how Jesus responds when he sees people caught in sin, and just his response in love and grace. I would pray that my response with this wouldn't be anger or enough of this filth and but would be that of just, oh man, let's pray. Hey, and not even like, oh, poor her, but poor us. I was listening to a message yesterday, a sermon, and the guy said, it was an Easter sermon, and he said, the only thing we really contribute to our own salvation is the sin that makes what Jesus did on the cross necessary. That's the only thing you contribute to your salvation. And it's so interesting. We're all fellow sinners, and I would hope that we would all look at her with compassion and grace, and at the same time be like, oh yeah, no, we're not going to watch that music video. It's okay to have discernment.
Yeah,
it doesn't mean let our kids watch whatever, but I hope that what our kids would see is the grace and the focus on Christ there in this, as opposed to judgment, hate, frothing at the mouth.
Well, and I think the challenge is to speak truthfully without going on, a moral rampage.
Yeah, it's just not necessary.
Yeah.
Like, there's no kid that sits there and at some point doesn't tune you out when you start to do that. And so I think, really, I mean,
wah, wah.
Like, wah, wah. So I think it's important that, like, as parents, I really try to be cognizant of this. And my girls are really little. And I include this for my son. Like, this semi-prostitution, whatever you want to call it, is everywhere, right? Yeah. Provocative images are everywhere. And so I am like my kid's shield. It's my responsibility to help them process this stuff, but also keep them away from things. And of course, as they're teenagers, you can't block everything, nor is that my desire.
Right.
But like you're saying, Adam, like to help them work through this stuff and to have boundaries in place, because one day when they leave, it's all going to be out in the open. And they have to have that kind of discernment to make those choices for themselves.
That's exactly right. And I think that part of the bigger conversation here, and conversation is a word we use a lot on the Plugged In show, is we want to be cultivating relationships where that channel is open both ways, right? And it's not just us wagging a finger and saying, rah, 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 right? Because you're right, kids do tune that out. But I think my girls are 13 and 15. So we're right smack in the middle of this. And frankly, I have had to defer to my wife's judgment on some of the things that they want to wear. Because my dad response is, you're not going out in public wearing that. Right? And then my wife and I have a conversation. And it's actually instructive to go clothes shopping with them and see that, the only thing they sell these days is crop tops. You know, what like the entire culture is engaged in this conversation in some ways. But what we have really tried to do is just to cultivate that ongoing conversation about the purpose and place of sexuality, what God's intent was, how God thinks about us, why this is important, why it's important to have those boundaries that are different than the world, because the world is looking to use that part of our identity to meet needs in ways that don't line up with what God intended.
That's good. I like that.
I think just one other thing, you're talking about, trying to figure out like what your daughters should be allowed to wear in public and stuff. And the thing that I think about here is you really do just have to continually talk to your kids about like, this is why I'm making this decision. It's not because you're not trying to shame your kid and be like, what are you thinking? Like what they're thinking is, this is what was on sale and it fits me, especially for young women. Like one of the hardest things that I dealt with growing up, and my sisters too, it was hard for us to find clothes that fit us correctly, because what looked good on, a size 0 model looked horrible on us just because we have a different body type, So it's not about necessarily saying you can't do this because it's evil. It's about these are the, you can't watch that movie because it's a little too violent. You can't listen to JoJo Siwa because this song is kind of inappropriate. You can't wear that outfit because it's a little too revealing. And you're not doing that, again, because you're like, you're horrible and what were you thinking? It's more about you're going to be an adult here in a few years, and I want you to know how to make these decisions for yourself, because especially coming back to that Me Too movement, you will be preyed upon. It's not if, it's usually a when. And I want you to be prepared to protect yourself when I can no longer protect you.
Yeah.
And if I may add just a short little thing to that, I love it because, Emily, what you're talking about is getting to the why behind it. Not just a rule, but the why behind it. And another way to do that, especially as our kids get older, is if they come up and sometimes it only works out when they're like, can I buy this? Is it? And then instead of just saying no and here's why, say, I don't know, what do you think?
Yeah.
And turn around and asking them. So it almost having them come up with the why, having them learn to articulate the reasoning or the thoughts behind it, and learning maybe a little bit about that. So maybe, but I agree with you wholeheartedly, get to the why as much as possible. And sometimes that would be, I remember so often, especially with my youngest, she'd come up and, can I do this? I'm like, I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah.
I would just constantly do that.
Well,
I just put the ball in her court.
And just to begin to bring our conversation in for a landing here, because I think there's so much that we could keep talking about, even with somebody like JoJo Siwa, instead of just saying, well, that's really problematic in a scoldy parental tone, just inviting our kids to say, what do you think of the choices she's making here? Like, what do you think of the way she is presenting herself as an adult, and just let's have a conversation about it, as opposed to, and obviously that's going to be dependent somewhat on how old your kids are, on their maturity level. But as they move into those teen years, I think having those conversations and giving them the space to respond, as opposed to just sort of imposing the opinion, is the way we need to go.
Yeah, making it a dialogue. Maybe even asking, what are ways we do the same thing?
Right.
I used to teach in high school. I taught a class similar to this to my high schoolers, and it was really breaking down like lyrics of songs. And at first I would find that they're all like rolling their eyes, like, oh, it's not that big of a deal, miss, like chill out, whatever. But the more we dug into it, what I realized is like no one's asking them these questions.
Right.
Yeah,
we're not
absolutely.
talking about this.
Exactly.
Like, what do you think? And the fact that they even get to vocalize or have a platform to talk about it was so crucial. And I don't have teenagers yet, but that was like my only...
It's coming.
I know.
Faster than you think.
It was her Michelle Pfeiffer moment.
It was. Anyway.
All right. Well, thanks, guys, for this conversation today. I hope as we've talked about JoJo Siwa and the bigger conversation about sexualization of entertainers and how that affects our families, especially our daughters, I hope that this has been an encouraging conversation for you today. Thanks, guys. Well, in our second segment today, we're going to talk about the latest popular video game to make the jump from that medium to, in this case, the small screen. And I'm talking about the new show Fallout on Prime Video. Emily Chow is with us again to talk about Fallout. Emily, what is going on with Fallout? Is there a nuclear bomb here?
There's many nuclear bombs.
There are several?
There's at least 4 that I counted.
Okay. So tell us about Fallout, the show.
So Fallout is based on the video game franchise, which, just for parents, FYI, that is an M17 plus rating for the video game franchise. The TV series is similarly rated TVMA, unsurprisingly. And basically what happens is there's a nuclear fallout, a nuclear war between 2 superpowers, the first one being the United States, the second one, as of the 2 episodes that I watched, unnamed. But the United States is just completely decimated, but a bunch of people survive, mostly rich people who could afford to pay their way. But they survive by hiding in these vaults. And inside the vaults, like, they basically knew that the war was coming. So they have designed these vaults to sustain these people until the world is livable again without radiation. And it's a retro-futuristic show, so everything is like the 50s, but also like super futuristic.
So it's Gilligan's Island with nukes.
Yeah. It's Gilligan's Island with high-tech technology. It's Star Trek. It's the original series of Star Trek. No.
Okay.
But it's not Star Trek. But regardless, inside these vaults, you've got these little societies that are like perfect and they think they're going to save the world someday. But what ends up happening is some of the surface dwellers, people who somehow survive. I don't know how these people survived.
They mutated, right?
Some of them have.
Okay.
Not all of them, but like
they turned into Wolverine.
No.
Wolverine
really. Was like cool. These people are creepy. No, so like most of them look just like normal humans, even though they're mutants or whatever. But regardless, they somehow get into this one vault where Lucy lives. And basically what happens is they just kind of go crazy and start killing everybody who lives in Lucy's vault. And then they kidnap her dad. And somehow the leader of this savage group, somehow she knows who Lucy and her dad are. Again, I'm sure that'll be explained in later episodes. But so what Lucy does is she decides that she's going to go to the surface. She's the only person in her vault who has ever left the vault, but she's going to go to the surface and rescue her dad. And yeah, just from there, like... So this is not the story of any of the Fallout video games, for what I could tell.
Okay.
They just use all of the technology and all of the lore from the video games, but it's its own story.
Because the games are sort of a post-apocalyptic shooter, aren't they?
Yes, that is what the games are. And this is not dissimilar to that.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a post-apocalyptic, lots of... Let's just say there's a lot of exploding body parts and a lot of gore goes along with that. In addition, there's sexual content. I don't know how much of that was in the video games, but it's very heavy very early on here in the TV series. And then, of course, language. Lucy, coming from her perfect 50s-esque world, doesn't really swear very much, but every now and then, like, someone will elicit a stronger response in her. I think she said the D word once, but that is not the worst of it. People on the surface are dropping F-bombs everywhere.
So we have nuclear bombs, we have F-bombs, we have violence and sexuality. It sounds like there's a ton of content here. I know the buzz on this show has been huge, and
it's well made.
The early response has been really good in terms of a critical reception to it.
Yes, critically speaking, it is very well made. It's an intriguing storyline, but the advice I would offer to parents is if you didn't let your kids play the video game, definitely don't let them watch the TV series.
Well, and it seems like my understanding of Fallout is there's not a ton of sexual content, and so it seems like they have they have amped it up, which unfortunately that's what we see with TVMA shows these days.
Look at Halo.
Yeah, exactly.
The whole Master Cheeks thing, it's because there is no nudity in Halo, the video game series, but then when they turned it into a TV series, they were like, oh, we got to get people naked somehow, and it's so unnecessary, and it does nothing to drive the plot.
Well, let me ask another question that's sort of tangentially related here. This, you mentioned Halo, and this is just the latest in a long series of video games that have been turned into either movies or TV shows. We've got Ark, The Last of Us, Super Mario Bros. And we can go back through time and it's just pretty constant. Why do you think that we're seeing these video games make this leap to the big and small screen?
So I think part of it is that Hollywood is kind of out of ideas, but I think the bigger part of it is they've recognized that video games have this huge audience, millions of video gamers worldwide, and it crosses, continents, countries, languages, like people who don't speak English will still play English-speaking video games because they enjoy the game experience. You don't have to speak the language to know how to push the buttons. You know what I mean?
Yep.
So I think what they're realizing is these video game series have massive followings, and so they're trying to bank on that. Is what I think is happening. And in some ways, they can honor the original content, which I think is why Fallout is being well received, because, again, it uses the technology and the lore, but not the plot. So they're not killing what people loved about the video game series. Rather, they're just using content from that to create a brand new thing. The reason people hate Halo so much, the TV show, is because they actually took the original character and they warped him and twisted him into something he's not. They gave him a face, which is something that was actually, I think, the biggest thing.
Master Chief does not have a face.
Master Chief is not. He never takes his helmet off in the game series, or if he does, like, you can't see it. I can't remember what it was, but you never see his face, and that was what made him so relatable, because he could be anybody,
right?
But
it's
then they
the
were
Boba
like,
Fett problem, right?
Exactly.
Leave the helmet on.
But then they gave him a face, and it was like, oh, so now this is who he is. He can't, and to me, that alienated a great number of people, because people who were like, he could look like me for all we know.
That's right.
No, not anymore. Now
Maybe
he looks
I
like
am
that
Master
guy.
Chief. Yeah, exactly. Well, I think it's such an interesting conversation, because if you followed it at all over the years, there are plenty of video game adaptations that pretty much failed as movies. And I think that's because games tend to have a linear sort of progression. And it sounds like with Fallout, they've taken sort of the core motif, if you will, but expanded it dramatically in a way that doesn't necessarily line up with the actual gameplay,
yes.
but is true to the world that we find there.
It's like, here's some Easter eggs to make this really enjoyable if you loved the video game series, but we're not going to ruin the game series for you by changing everything.
Okay. Emily, thanks so much for telling us about Fallout, the show. And if you go to the episode notes for today's show, you will find links to both the show and the game. Thanks, Emily. Well, now it's time for a segment we call Pop Culture Connection, in which we are joined by our very cheerful producer, Ashley. Hey, Ashley.
Hey, Adam.
I hope you don't mind me characterizing you as cheerful.
Not at all.
And Ashley's going to read us each a question. And if you've never heard this segment before, our goal is to give as many answers to that pop culture related question as possible. Ashley, go.
All right. Emily, I've got you up first.
Of course you do.
I'm so excited to hear your answer for this, though.
Oh, my. Okay,
right.
Let's do this.
Who do you think is the best villain of all time and why?
Alan Rickman in anything.
Oh, my
Hans
goodness.
Gruber. No, he's got the brooding look. He's got like the sneer down to a T. He's got, there's just something about his face, like the way he glares at you. And then of course his voice, like, when he's playing Colonel Brandon, you love it. When he's playing, the bad guy from Sweeney Todd, you're like, oh my goodness.
Or
Please
Snape.
do not try to kill me.
Right. Awesome.
Sorry, I had to chime in there with Snape.
Snape
So
is
good.
not a villain.
absolutely.
I know, but
we
he's
need to talk.
he's villainous-ish. No, he's a hero ultimately, but another podcast for another time.
He's
She was thinking
complex.
about him from Galaxy Quest.
How many points did
Yes,
she get?
I got 8 points.
Oh,
Yeah,
nice
dude.
job.
Yay.
Nice job.
Very good.
Your answers
very
have been
good.
like almost like just so solid that even if someone gives more, I feel like you win.
Yeah.
They're so
I
deep.
mean,
I'm
you
like,
were
"Whew."
right there with
Man.
like, the low-hanging fruit is Darth Vader, right?
I
Well,
mean, yeah.
But she covered a
She's
multitude
too
of
mature
villains.
for that. She's
I
moved
She was
know.
on.
the actor.
She's moved on. I see what you did there, Kristen.
Yeah.
Who's next?
All right, Jonathan, you're up next.
Oh, man.
Here we go.
Here we go.
What is the craziest reality show you've ever seen, and what made it so silly?
Well, I don't watch any reality shows other than American Idol decades ago, but I do watch Alone. So I'll have to talk about that. Alone is great because it's like people that are stuck alone, like on, the middle of an island, and they have to survive. And it's crazy because some of them start fat, hoping that their fat will last them for, when they're hungry. They have to go hunting. They're navigating weather. They're psychologically, toiling with the turmoil of missing people. They're making their own. Yeah, boy, that was not
That
very
was
long.
good.
I'm curious. I want to know more about this show, though. Like,
Oh, it's
how long
so-
are they stranded?
Legit.
It's amazing. It's on Netflix, and
Yes.
it's like we can't not. Oh my gosh, I've
I
only
think I
seen
might need to
two
watch
seasons.
this because
Alone.
I like Survivor type stuff
Yep.
like that.
And
I
I have
like it.
often asked myself, how long would my fat last? So that's a very provocative
That's
question.
way
Well, and
program
the thing we hate about reality shows is the drama and the getting each other and stuff. And this, there's none of that. It's just
Yeah,
somebody
that's-
surviving.
that's
so it's just
kinda
like
what I'm
Castaway
thinking.
as a show.
It is. It is completely that.
Crazy. 6 points, Jonathan.
Oh,
Nice job.
Emily. You nailed
Emily
Jonathan.
remains in the
Carrying the
lead.
crown.
All right, who's next?
That's awesome. Go M.
All right, Kristen.
This causes so much anxiety in my body.
Oh
every
no,
time
this
you
is
say
this is an editorial type
Kristen's in
conversation.
fight or flight right
that. I
now.
really am. Get me out of here.
What is your least favorite thing about technology?
Ooh.
I think it submerses you in its own world. It distracts you. It makes you feel entitled to escape. It is going to replace jobs, although that might be good. It I don't know. It makes time seem like it is like time goes by really quickly, and you don't know that it's going by really quickly. It makes you little addicts in your little brains for your little kids that shouldn't be watching so much technology. That's it.
Nice job. 6 points for that one.
Ooh. Just really quick, my least favorite thing about technology is that the holodeck isn't real.
Right? I'm telling you.
That's excellent. I should have come.
Right?
That is my
exactly.
That's my least favorite.
You answer
thing.
for me next time. See?
I guess I'm up next, huh?
All right, Adam. Yes, you are our last one. Would you choose TikTok or YouTube, and why?
Oh, YouTube, easily. In part because I like longer videos. I actually watch a lot of YouTube. YouTube sort of, it's just more thoughtful. There's more going on there. I never would have thought of YouTube as long form media before TikTok. I mean, I do like to laugh a little bit, but you can also find short videos on YouTube. So everything TikTok does, you can find on YouTube as well. So, but the same is not true the other way. And most of my favorite YouTubers aren't on TikTok.
Well, very good. I got 7 points for you.
Emily, you're a winner.
Yay!
Yay me. There's another,
Emily,
2000s
it's not your birthday.
throwback.
Exactly. All right. Well, thanks, guys, for playing our game today. And congratulations to Emily. Good job, Emily.
Good job, Emily.
And I want to thank you for listening to our conversation today. As always, we hope that it's equipped, encouraged, and challenged you in some way as you think about your entertainment and technology choices and how your kids are navigating that as well, if that's applicable to you. So what did you think about our conversations on this episode? What did you think about JoJo Siwa's rebranding? Are you watching Fallout? Either way, we would love to hear from you, and here's how you can let us know. If you go to thepluggedinshow.com, you can leave us a voicemail with your answer to those questions, and we might just include your message on a future show. Or you can reach out to us at team@thepluggedinshow.com, and of course, you can catch us on Facebook and Instagram. And we would also love to remind you that Plugged In is a part of Focus on the Family, and we're a donor-supported ministry. If you've enjoyed or have been encouraged by our conversation today, we'd love for you to help us keep bringing you the Plugged In Show by making a donation, and you can learn more about how to do that in the episode notes for today's show as well. Well, thanks again for spending some time with us at the Plugged In Show this week. We know there are so many things competing for your attention. We love that you have chosen to spend some of that precious time with us, and we look forward to another episode next week on the Plugged In Show.
Have you felt it? The calling? The whisper from God that you are meant to help children in out-of-home care? This might be fostering or adopting a child, kinship care, or as a valuable family ally. Focus on the Family has created a website that can help you find your unique purpose at waitnomore.org. No act is too small to a child or fostering family that needs your help. Learn more at waitnomore.org.